Thank you for joining us today on Foundations, our first video podcast. Today we're joined by Brendon Smith from Skudo via Australia. He's a good friend of mine. How did we first meet, Brendon?
We met at an ACI convention.
American Concrete Institute convention.
Yeah.
Remember about how long ago?
6 or 7 years, I'd say.
Okay. And how did that go?
I was of course overwhelmed by your abilities, but no. Who's this guy? No, it was. I think that was my first ACI convention, so it was all new to me. People in the industry, different committees, different groups that were on the peripheral of what we do in terms of temporary protection for construction sites. So. Yeah, it was a good learning experience. Good.
Did I just like walk up to you randomly, or sometimes I just randomly pick people to start talking to?
I think I was talking with some guys I did know, either from Husqvarna. It may have been Joe Reardon. Was he with Stace then, or I can't remember. Yeah, just those boys and those. Yeah, I think that's how we met.
Okay.
Yeah. In a bar, of course.
In a bar.
It wasn't that big. So, yeah.
What did we talk about? So Skudo does protection of floors, and so is a polished concrete consultant, or that's the name of the company, but we do a lot more than that. We a lot of times get involved in construction projects very early on in the design phase, and I've had some fun projects that had a tremendous amount of damage, and the products you offer protect the concrete between the day the concrete is poured and the finish or final installation of the project, whatever the flooring type may be, right?
Yeah, so a little bit of a tweak on that is there are some limitations as to when our products can be installed and what products are installed at various times, and that goes back to the moisture in the slab. So if we're effectively covering that slab, there's a number of factors we need to consider. Mix design, time of year,
right. Yep.
Hopefully there's a vapor barrier underneath. Other things like how thick the slab is.
Mm-hmm.
Is it slab on grade, or is it?
Because that determines how long it takes for the moisture to release.
Whether it's super plasticizers or water reducers used.
Mm-hmm.
That helps us with how much, and of course there's within the hydration of the concrete that some of that moisture is used in that process. So there are some time delays which some GCs don't like. They don't like waiting because they've got other trades and they've got to get the steel up and they've got to get on with building the actual the job site, the building, as it were. So there are some limitations. So it can't be immediately after the pour, but usually within 7 to 10 days onwards. And again, those other factors, thickness of the slab and time of year and that sort of thing, will help determine when we're comfortable with having our products put down there.
Well, I want to get into some of those technical things a little later. Let's back up a little bit.
Sure.
How did you end up? You live in Dallas,
mm-hmm.
Texas. How did you end up here? Because your accent is strangely southern.
Yeah, I'm a little bit. It's funny. People say, "Oh, where are you from?" I said, "Oh, I live in Dallas." Yeah, I'm not from the south. And I said, "Oh, I'm a little bit further south." You know, keep going. So I come across Skudo as I helped out my wife's family business, which is a marble and mosaic wholesaler in Australia. So we're at a tile trade show, and we came across this guy that had this prototype product in the corner of another booth. He was just tagging onto, and that would have been 2007, 2008.
Okay.
And immediately loved it. Saw the potential for concrete, hardwood floors, tiles, terrazzo, you name it.
Mhm.
It's not only horizontal surfaces, it's also vertical surfaces. So our products aren't just for floors. We do walls, windows, glass, that's all, metals. Anyway, so yeah. Long story short, found Skudo.
In Australia.
In Australia, yeah. So at a trade show in Australia.
Because that's where you're really from, is Australia.
Sorry, I missed that bit. I didn't want someone to suggest it was New Zealand, because then there's a
that would be a big that would be totally insulting.
Exactly right.
No offense to New Zealand.
No, and it's that love-hate relationship. Go the Anzacs. Yeah, so the Australian distributorship of Skudo had already been taken. And at that stage, my brother-in-law had a business here in the States, based out of San Francisco, wholesaling marble and mosaics.
Okay.
So I thought, all right, he's done it. You know,
Easy.
yeah. Oh well, there's a roadmap as a someone's already paved the way, as it were. So yeah, a couple of years later, packed the kids, 2 kids and the wife up. And at the time, it was going to be for 2 years.
Okay.
That was 11 years ago, and yeah, come on over.
So moved to California.
Moved to California, San Francisco.
And it was exactly like Australia, right?
A little bit, in terms of the multicultural. You know, Silicon Valley has a lot of people from all over the world working there. So, but it was very different.
Where in the Bay Area did you live?
Initially, San Carlos. Did that go down the wrong way?
No, the ice slid all the way forward and splashed all over my face.
Oh,
On the video.
I didn't say. Just say, Rachel, grab me a napkin. Or where were you, San Carlos?
San Carlos, just back from the main drag.
I have to ask you. Wait, never
Is it
mind.
on my shirt?
You have like one little dot, which is on the other shoulder that we can see.
Sorry about that. That was quite comical. I wish we were live, because that would have been a cool segue.
Well, I might keep it in, but I'll ask you again, just so, because I don't know where we cut. So, where did you live in the Bay Area again?
Lived in San Carlos, and then later on San Mateo, but right down in that Southern Bay area. Yeah.
I grew up in Walnut Creek, up North
really?
Bay, yeah, East Bay, yeah.
There
So.
you go.
Okay.
Beautiful area.
So careful what you say about California. No,
Sure.
just kidding. I'm just kidding. David gives me un poquito grief.
I never give you grief.
Just
I lived in California. You used to live in San Diego.
well, that's gorgeous. Anyway, well, let's not digress. I will go on a digression.
Okay, Bay Area.
Yeah, so started there, little 5,000 square foot warehouse that I was entering the phones, packing the orders, unloading the trucks, loading the trucks, punching the invoices. That was the one-man show, as it's known. So it was a long time ago, and you know, we've grown a lot since then, obviously.
Mm-hmm. So what made you move from California to Texas?
A couple of things. Freight was one of the main things. You know, we were trying to warehouse something out of San Francisco and sell it to the East Coast was near on impossible unless we were going to pony up for the whole freight free, and we just weren't at that stage to be able to do that. Doing business in California is more expensive. Living in California is more expensive. So it was a combination of personal and business. Being central, but I mean more in the middle of the country made it easier to bring our stuff in and then distribute it around the country. So, so yeah, we're in San Francisco for 2 years, and then once the lease was up on the warehouse, packed it all up and hit the road for Dallas.
So how did your wife and kids feel about a move first from Australia to California, and then just as they were kind of getting settled in California, moving from California to Texas. Because I know that from Australians it's not a big deal, but for some people, moving from California to Texas is kind of a cultural shock. How did that work for you guys?
If anything, it was more, Texans are more like us Aussies in terms
Yeah, I
of
would think so.
more laid back. They'll look you in the eye, they say g'day, you know, like there's,
We say good day
say hello.
Okay.
Howdy.
or howdy.
Howdy. The kids, when we first moved from Australia, were 5 and 2.5. Like, so they really didn't have an anchoring. It's funny, my daughter still has an Aussie accent, because and when she remember when she first started school in St. Carlos, she said, Mum and Dad, the kids just don't understand me unless I talk like them. And so then within a week, she had her American accent down pat. But then she's home, she would
You guys corrupted her again.
yeah. So she'd switch. But my son, he never really had a chance to develop the Aussie accent. So you'd never know he was from Oz. So,
Okay.
But the move to Texas, my wife Deborah, my lovely wife Deborah, she by this stage could see the potential for the business, and we weren't going home within 2 years. You know, there was still more work to be done and more adventures. You know, we love the outdoors, so camping's our thing, hiking and camping's our thing. So we did a lot of that in California and continue to do a lot of that in Texas and the surrounding states. So yeah,
Okay.
we probably see more of Texas than most Texans, I think. Well, within our friendship, within our friend group, that's certainly the case. So.
Yeah, I mean, Texas is a huge place, like
Yeah.
Australia.
Yeah.
You know,
And
kinda
that's
get caught
the
up
other
in your
thing.
life. And
Yeah, and that's the other thing. So if you overlay the map of Australia on the US, they're pretty much the same landmass.
yes, almost the same.
And so driving for 4 or 6 hours isn't a big deal for us.
Right.
You know, from Sydney to Melbourne, 8+ hours. Same to Sydney to Brisbane. So we don't think much of it. So we can we're not phased by heading down to San Antonio for a couple of days.
Sure. Yeah.
In a national park or whatever. So
Okay.
yeah.
So since you and I met, you know, at that point you were kind of, at least in my view, kind of really just starting to get going in the States. I mean, maybe you've done a lot in California. I had not run into you, you know, as a flooring protection type since then, or you know, prior to that. But you know, I also saw the value of your products. I think one of the things that you, I'm sure, don't even know this, but one of the things that kind of led me to spend more time working with you than maybe I might have before as a consultant is a project that was done right before I met you was at a school district here down in Dallas, and it was a vocational center. So you know, they teach high school beauticians and plumbers and HVAC repair and all kinds of stuff. So district spent a lot of money on this building. The general contractor had, I think, about $600,000 to spend on protection, because the floors were polished concrete, but you had bands of larger aggregate exposure with sand aggregate on both sides. You had colors and patterns rolling through it, and it was a beautiful project design. And I was the consultant on the project literally from day one. So we managed the concrete pour and, you know, had great finish work. Everything was moving along nicely. The GC on this particular project decided to pocket the floor protection. Well, the very first time that I was out there, I noticed that they had a bunch of lifts running around, which is a very tall building. So they had a bunch of lifts running around, and they had screws on all the tires and everything else. So I proceeded to remind them that in their specifications and in their contract, they were required to have floor protection and required to have diapers on all the lifts and have no screws in the tires. To which the GC basically said, yeah. The architect, I think there was like 20-something architecture reports on top of my 6 or 8 consultant reports. There's like 20-something architecture reports where the architect called them out for lack of protection. So we show up to start polishing this job, and conservatively, there was probably 500,000 chips. 500,000, dime or slightly smaller divots in the concrete. They had pallets with nails on the bottom. They wouldn't try to lift up. They would lift them like 1/8 of an inch and then just drag them down the hallways. Screws in the lift tires I could follow the electrician, chip, under a light. Back up, chip, down to the next light. We could just follow the trails. I can tell you that electrician, HVAC, sprinkler guy, everybody was just causing nothing but problems. So we show up to polish the school, and it's impossible to get anything even close to what they wanted because you had so many holes in the concrete. Even, chips in concrete are typically deeper than a polished concrete grinder will go unless you're doing a deep grind, say, nickel to quarter size aggregate. So that wasn't the intent here. So we had all these problems, and I had no real recourse. Now we ended up, unfortunately, instead of doing all the really nice architectural design, we ended up taking the whole job to a deep grind exposed aggregate and just grinding through all the damage.
Wow.
We still didn't get through all of it, but the repairs that we did I picked a material that looked like the rock, so you can't really differentiate between the holes that are repairs and the big rocks that are exposed. But that's what we ended up having to do. So it took what I thought was probably an award-winning architectural design and scrapped it due to a lack of protection.
What was so 600,000 not used for protection? What was the fix? What was the bill for the
1.1 million
Oof.
is what they paid for the fix. So yeah, the GC ended up with that $500,000 loss that the GC ended up having to cover because they didn't use the protection that they had in the budget that we put in right from the beginning. So that kind of led me to go, okay, well, I've been down the road with a bunch of different flooring types, and some of them, they are flooring protection types. Some of them they get, first time they get rained on, they curl up or they fall apart. Some of them they lift at the edges and you get sand underneath them, and they just act like fine grit sandpaper sanding the slab. And some of them, they'll leave marks in the finish. Some of them have hydration issues where you have, you put Visqueen or plastic down, it looks like a cheetah print on the concrete because everywhere that the plastic touches is darker and everywhere the plastic's bubbled is lighter. And so no real good pattern. And so I've been down the road of trying a bunch of different products, and for a decorative project like a polished concrete job, I had not found any that I was in love with, really. And then I saw your product, and so the first product I started using was your HT mat, which you put a
commercial system.
Yeah. So I call it a glue. You call it a base coat. I call it it's a glue that has a better bond with the mat than it does with the slab.
Yeah,
right?
it has elastomeric properties.
Explain it to us.
Yeah, so the base coat, we don't like using glue. Like, we get all sorts of we need 3 more buckets of the shit, or we need 3 more buckets of the glue or adhesive, because we don't want them to the same connotations of adhesive, because adhesive is generally in the decorative world, someone's put masking tape on the concrete and it's etched the surface, or so
duct tape.
Yeah,
for the audience, just so if you ever wonder, duct tape sticks so well because the glue is acidic. So you have an acid in the glue which lets it eat and then have a really good bond to anything that it sticks to. So when you put duct tape on concrete, that acid eats the binding paste that holds the cement together. So when you peel the duct tape up, you look at the back of the duct tape and you've got particulate attached to the back, and then you look at the floor and you've got pits. Actually, I got a funny little side story. There's actually, so I go to a church called Hope Fellowship in North Dallas area, and we did the floors, and I actually managed the floors and helped the church, and we managed the floors, and we polished the concrete in my church, and it turned out beautifully. You know, we dyed it a couple of colors. It was great. We finished the job about March or April. So everybody's ecstatic. Everything looks beautiful. It's a fantastic job. Everything looks great. And then summer rolls around. Well, the church ends up hiring an outside group to do vacation Bible study for the summer. And I get a call on like a Friday. Hey, David, can you come by the church and look at something? We got a little bit of a problem. So I go by to look. The vacation Bible team, without talking to the church, used duct tape to put number 1 through number 13 or number 14 on the floor, because they would say, okay, you kids go to number 1, you kids go line up at the 2, you kids line up at the 3, and then when they peeled the duct tape up, it took not only the concrete but also the color off the top as well. And now the church is trying to figure out, hey, I got numbers 1 through 14 here, in the middle of the foyer, the main entrance to the church. Oh no! In the concrete, and how do I get that fixed? And I'm like, well, there's not really an easy way to get that fixed. Sorry, didn't mean to digress. So glue, that's what you're talking about. Glue and adhesive. You don't want to be in that bucket.
No, no.
Okay.
So the concept is the base coat is applied to the surface, and then while it's still wet, the mat is rolled out into it. And the fibres of the mat, it's a coated mat, so it has a coating on the top of it. But the underside is still quite fibrous. So when the base coat dries, it will fuse to the back of the mat. Mm-hmm. So 2-part application, but then they become one. So it holds it down during construction, you don't get any dirt debris getting underneath it. And then when you peel it up, the base coat has elastomeric properties. It comes up with the mat.
So a clean concrete.
Yeah. And again, just like anything, the base coat has to be applied correctly. You won't go and waterproof a subterranean wall just with half the manufacturer's spec dosage. So same thing. If the base coat's applied thick enough to be film forming, it will peel up clean. So that comes from user experience, and we've gotten better over the many years of helping with instructional videos, do's and don'ts, and our skilled reps out in the field will usually hold most people's hands for the first install, mm-hmm. and do demos and training and whatnot. So yes, the commercial system's our flagship product, and I suppose that's what sets us apart from most other. For the GCs for the longest time, they've just used whatever they've been able to find. They've sometimes put together on site. I'll put some visqueen and then I'll put some masonite over the top of it. Mm-hmm. Just from it worked kind of okay in the last job, or someone from another job said that this works for them. Again, different parts of the country, different environmental conditions. So a lot of these things are word of mouth over time, and so our products are really one of the very few that have been purposely built. And our tagline is temporary surface protection. This is all we do. This is it. So we develop, we produce, and we manufacture our own gear. So if we see a problem in the field, as it were, that our customers are seeing, we'll work our hardest to develop a product to solve that problem. So
now you and I talk, I think at most about every other week.
Mm-hmm. I do have a question. So people find out about your project generally after they've had if they don't know about your project before or product before, they've had a bad experience, right, with all of the myriad things that you guys have kind of discussed, and they're like, we need a better solution for protection. And so that's when you guys come in as, you just kind of say.
Yeah, it's sometimes it's at trade shows or referrals, or with
or it's
say,
in the specifications
or whatnot. But yeah, if I had $1 for every time someone had said, "Oh, I wish I had you on my last project," because of
Yes.
So
Okay.
trade shows help a lot. Lunch and learns we will do with regional GC offices or city offices. We'll do demos and the likes. But yeah, there is a bit of that. I think for a lot of GCs, that's the pain point of I'm not doing that again. I'm not winging it, or I'm going to just use the same crappy product.
Right.
It didn't work last time, but I'm going to install it 4 or 5 times over the project.
Right.
Rather than getting a premium product that's specifically designed and built for this for that purpose.
So your headache relief. So that's kind of like when we go in on consulting, like when programs don't have any kind of direction. So you guys are. That's interesting. So you're both in both perspectives coming in.
Yeah.
And people are always like, "Oh, we wish we would have used you."
Exactly
Okay,
right.
interesting. All right.
And they're the and from those adversities, sometimes they'll come up with a scenario that we haven't come across before, and we go, "All right, we might be able to put together a product." And I came to the States with one product, and now we've got over a dozen. And each time there's a need. Let's see if we can develop something for that scenario. So yeah.
Oh, that's exciting. So you get to actually. So there's some.
Yeah,
kind of
you're sitting around
product development.
Sitting around a conference room or boardroom table, just we could do this and we do that, and so it's funny. I suppose our skill set has grown over the years because we've had to get to know polished concrete right at the from go to woe. Terrazzo, hardwood floors.
That's Australian from the beginning to the end.
Oh yes, sorry. Thanks for your trip.
I didn't have the Australian translator setting on yet. Sorry.
Subtitles there. And so there's those opportunities, as they were. That someone's problems become a possible solution for us to solve. So
that's great. You get to solutions design, solutions architect. That's great.
Yeah.
So I was saying, you and I talk about every other week. I'm guessing. Is that about right?
Yeah.
That's
fair. Yeah.
What do we normally? What are our normal communications? How do we normally talk?
It's either a text or an email, which turns into a phone call of, we've got this problem. I've got this GC. Either you'll have a GC or I'll have a GC that has a certain something that's gone belly up, and we're trying to work out a fix, as it were. And from your experience of years of consulting and in the field expertise, I think that's I draw on that quite a bit, trying to give our customers or our potential customers a solution. Yes, I tell my reps all the time. I said, look, if we're known as someone that as the go-to people rather than the product sales, so if my guys can get in the mindset of just be a solution, even if you don't sell a product, even if you give the heads up to a GC to say, look, I know you want to use our products, but for the short window of time or the environment you want to put it, it's not going to be the best. We're going to refer you to X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. That for us is, I think, as a company, is far more beneficial and of value. If we can, that's the value proposition. We're a solution provider rather than a product salesman. And if my guys can do that, I lean on your expertise a lot from years of experience. Like you know how to fix hydration lines or how to
weird odd stuff.
Yeah, weird odd stuff.
Well, this product has a little bit of a darkening agent. It looks like they might have used this. Ask them this question, and if they did do that, then try this chemical because that will take care of it.
Yeah,
kind of stuff,
yeah.
right?
And the same with the tape. How do I fix this?
Yeah.
Well, often there's not. So, or so that's so that's usually our brainstorming solutions.
So, honestly, I've never asked you this question, so this is a bit of a gamble.
Green.
What normally I end up talking to you most often, right? How do you explain me or my firm to either your reps or your customers?
So two different things. So for our reps, they will know you. We use Salesforce. So we use Salesforce Chatter. So if there is a problem in the field, or a customer has come up with a scenario and needs to fix, and we talk about it and help them out. I will go on to the Chatter and blast out to all the reps. Hey, have this scenario. These are the circumstances. This was the timeline of events. This was the suggested fix. And then other guys will maybe bounce back and say, "Oh, I've actually seen that in the field. Yeah, that would work for my customers." So it's sharing of knowledge, as it were. For my customers, it's a resource that will say, "Look, we have a consultant that we work heavily with. If you need some, if you need a solution to this, or even sometimes it's proactive rather than reactive, and that's what I'd rather be in front of it rather than trying to ask for solutions after the fact. I'd rather be, and that's what our reps do with our training, is try and think through every possible scenario, and if we don't have the expertise, then we'll definitely throw your name down their way.
So you reach out to me for concrete stuff. Do you have other friends or contacts that you've developed for tile and stone and other industries that you guys work with? Yeah, so
we work. So as I said, when I was first come across Skudo, I was helping run the distribution of the marble and tile industry. It's so funny. Before I worked with that firm, Artistic Stone in Australia, their US version is a different name, but I couldn't walk into a restaurant or a building or a hotel without looking at the floor to see what type of stone it was, or tile, the size of the tiles, because the size of the size of the grout joints, and then I came over here and of course when I came over here, Skudo was my target market was tile and hardwood floors. Then someone said, "You really should go to World of Concrete." I went to World of Concrete, and oh my God, I opened my eyes, and we've since won like 4 most innovative product awards in 10 years so of attending the show. But now, of course, I can't walk into anywhere that has concrete, whether it be polished, sealed, stained, or terrazzo, without, my eyes are always down. I must be running into things all the time because I'm always looking at the floor.
I resemble that problem.
Yeah. So, I've forgotten your question. Where were we going with that?
I asked if you had, we talk quite often about concrete related issues. Do you have others like me that you get for stone and tile?
There's a fellow that works with us. He's our technical director, Kieran Wiley. He used to work for me, for Artistic Stone in Australia. He was our Queensland rep. He then came over to the States, worked in my brother-in-law's company, and then came to work for us. So he's got 40 years of marble and tile industry, and through his contacts, who would also wholesalers that also would be selling hardwood floors and the like. So, and then also someone else we've got for terrazzo. So yeah, we've got a fair few.
So you have an inherent database, knowledge base for those, and just not as much for concrete.
Exactly right. Yeah, we don't have the practical experience that we have to reach out to you on.
Just was curious.
No, yeah.
The it's always interesting to me to kind of talk to people about. I see the world from my perspective, but I don't know as much about what the world views me personally or my company. I don't really kind of think about the outside perspective backwards as much because I'm too busy looking, out every day at problems.
So I suppose that your perspectives are dictated by your experience and your knowledge on a certain thing. So it's very interesting. Even senior superintendents and project managers that don't know what they don't know, but should know in the basic workings of concrete. Oh, it's got to be protected in 3 days after the pour, and I need to put up steel, and I get that, but the cure you put down is a dissipating cure, and you're going to cover it with
Right.
so it's going to get no UV sunlight, going to get no traffic.
How's
So-
it going to dissipate?
It's not going to
So
dissipate.
you
and-
realize that it needs almost 30 days of UV in order to break down.
Yeah, and different products have different timelines and have different requirements and at different penetrating mixes. So it is interesting that, like, I still am learning every day on in that field and in this industry. We have shifted our focus from, and maybe it's we've been pulled in that direction, or it's the lowest hanging fruit, but we're constantly, concrete is 80% of what we do, whether it be stairs, whether it be
Right.
pre-polish, post-polish, post-staining, so there's other
Well,
aspects to it.
The industry is moving that way. So for those of you watching, polished concrete, when we started doing it about, give or take, a little bit over 20 years ago, there was nothing. It came over from Europe as basically a hybrid from the stone polishing, terrazzo polishing industry. And in the 20 years that we've been polishing concrete, we've moved from basically zero to, in 2021, we surpassed 40% of all hard surface flooring projects, new construction in the United States. So, that's a meteoric growth rate, insanity. So to give you some perspective, ceramic tile took 90 years to get to the same point. Polished concrete did in 20 years. So the world, especially commercially, the world is moving towards polished concrete. The U.S. is kind of leading the way, but I get calls regularly on projects in Africa and Asia and Europe all the time. We were in Italy, just a few weeks ago, dealing with projects. So the polished concrete itself has exploded, and it's for specific reasons. Number one, probably the maintenance costs. It's not a no maintenance, but it is a low maintenance floor comparatively. It's about 10% the cost of maintaining VCT or vinyl tile, and about 45 or 40% the cost of maintaining a standard tile floor. So if you're a big retailer, big box retailer, or even a smaller format retailer, the difference in moving from a tile floor to a concrete floor can mean hundreds of millions of dollars a year in maintenance savings. Well, if you can show even just a $50 million a year increase without selling one more SKU out the door,
Right.
yeah, that's pure profit, right? So the switch from the other hard surface flooring types to concrete has been extremely rapid and seems to be growing like a hockey stick, vertically. It wouldn't surprise me if we don't hit 50% in the next 3 or 4 or 5 years. I don't know. But we're taking the market share away from the markets, the company that you came over here to represent, which is stone and tile, right? That's where the market share is coming from. It's not coming from wood much. It's not coming from like residential stuff. It's commercial hard surface materials switching over to concrete. So yeah, you got maintenance, you got the appearance, you got color and aggregates and all kinds of stuff as things have gotten more standardized. I think that the downside is that it's grown so fast that there's a kind of still a wild west of the industry, which you get to see some as the protection, because you can have 3 companies doing the polished concrete, the same concrete in the same region, done by the same contractor, done by the same general contractor, and see 3 different results, and they come back to you and try to blame it on your products, right?
Sometimes, yeah, and
Sometimes.
Yeah, and so that goes back to attention to detail, and also you get what you pay for. If you go the lowest bidder, and I get that government projects are required to go to the lowest bidder, but
Sometimes.
yeah, and so you do get what you pay for. And just like our industry, surface protection. If you're going to go for, there are still places that put red roslyn paper. It still blows my mind as to why it's red. It leaches red dye if it gets wet.
Concrete,
So I don't understand why that is still a thing. But you've got that at one end, and then some.
That's just in California.
Yeah. You've got some premium products that actually do the job.
Yeah.
So again, I've used this term a lot. Horses for courses. There are some scenarios where you would use our commercial system. Some scenarios you use our board. Some use our TACMAT, and it's knowing if the more information we've got, the better we can advise on the suitability, and it's sometimes that conversation isn't had until after the fact. Oh, I should have used this, but I didn't. I used this one because it was cheaper or whatever.
As the consultant, I hear that all the time. As a
Yeah.
consultant, I hear, oh, I would love to use that product, but it's so expensive. And I'm like, well, I can give you 10 project examples where the fix, because you didn't use a product like this, is a lot more expensive than the amount of money that you would spend on the product.
Labour is the biggest budget item, and yes, this
Especially today.
And trying to find people,
Yeah.
and finding decent people, let alone someone with a heartbeat that can push a broom, or someone that can actually understand what you want and actually do it time and time again. That's day and night from using product A that is a third of the cost of Skudo or one of our products, but you've got to put it down 4 times.
Yeah, 3 or 4 or 5 times. Through the
Forget that, but it's the actual labour of having said labourer go around and say, okay, rip up that, replace that area. Every time he picks up the protection that they've decided to run with, he picks it up, all the crap falls off it, and then puts the new one straight over the top of it, and then you've got the traffic, and then it's a sandpaper.
The sanding action,
Yeah, so again, whether it's in the psyche or it's in the scope of people's thinking, and I think it's a growing concern in terms of a knowledge base that people need to have. I see the guys that come out of college and a lot of business construction schools, like the younger PMs and the guys who will be superintendents or senior superintendents, they've been taught to not run with the old thing. They've been taught to, okay, you do it properly the first time, you don't.
It's because I'm teaching their classes.
Yeah. The callbacks and the subbies, whether they be.
Subbies is Australian for subcontractors.
I figured that one.
Yeah.
That was a good context. Yeah.
So the subbies don't want to come back because they don't want to remobilize for a fix. Once all the walls and the framing's gone up, they can't get big. If it's polishing, they can't get big machines in there.
Big equipment in,
Can't get it up. Can't get it in the lift. The lift well, which was from the freight elevator, is now dismantled. And it's not existent. Power. So those sorts of things are really it's a headache for them. So, and they're going to charge accordingly to the GC. So then that's when comes that cost. just do it right the first time and be done with it. It's like insurance.
So I had a customer, a massive project, actually in Seattle area, that recently was using your commercial system, and then this was I want to say it was about a 500,000 square foot project, and they did a remodeled about 250 or 300,000 square feet, and added on 250,000 or so square feet to the site, to the building. And so the system they were using was your commercial system throughout, with a board system in their really high traffic areas. So both on the on the construction side, high traffic, so where they're dragging in pallets and big lifts and all kinds of stuff, but then also as they were moving around the temporary entrances and temporary traffic patterns for customers, they were using your Skudo board system on top of the commercial system. Help me understand, how long has the board been around, and what are the kind of the best uses for that in exchange? Because the same GC asked me, well, if I just use the board, what will that do? And my answer was, well, I'm worried about the joints on the board and hydration lines from your joints between the board, but if it's over the commercial system, I didn't have any concern with that.
Yeah. So
kind of talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the commercial system, and I should have mentioned this earlier, the commercial system is breathable. So whereas the board is not, it's think of it as plastic plywood, 4x8 sheet, very hard wearing, very, very strong. And when you've, and this goes back, you've seen this, when you've gone into a restaurant that has had tile and then they've gone to a polished concrete, you can see the ghosting of the framing of where the tiles used to be. So that was from the moisture couldn't go through the tile, so it goes into the grout joint, so it funnels up. So that's an example of what you were talking about in terms of the joins around the boards. So the mat itself allows moisture to come up consistently, yeah. And so if there's board on top of it in a high traffic path, as it were, it's still going to go laterally and then up through it. So although it's breathable, it breathes slower than if it wasn't there. That's just common sense. But the board itself is 4x8 sheets, as I said, fire retardant.
That doesn't mean fireproof.
No.
Because you can still get it to burn.
Oh.
Yeah.
Fire retardant means it
slows it down.
It's harder to get it to burn.
Well, it won't propagate the flame.
Yeah.
So you can put a match to it. So welding and grinding. We've got some videos on our website that show guys with a cutting torch right over the board, probably a foot off the ground, and it didn't even bother, it didn't phase it. And again, that's fire retardant and fire resistant things are different, and that's in more of the fabrics side of things. But yeah, bricks will burn at a certain temperature, so it's all relative. But the board is quite versatile, and its popularity is exploding because it's reusable. So if someone's got it in a straight run down the middle of a high traffic aisle, and again, they're 4x8 sheets, so you can either put them side by side, or you can brick bond them, stack bond them, or even herringbone for a stronger structure. And then they'll take them from that floor, they'll take them up to the next floor, or they'll take them to the next job.
Yeah, that's what I've seen.
So it's quite versatile in that respect. We have another version of that which it's called the Interlock. So it has effectively T pieces. Think of a tongue and groove, but laterally, and it's designed for guys that need to work in a commercial aspect after hours. So they need to mobilise in and then demobilise once they're finished work overnight. So these things will pack onto a pallet, stick them outside, or
Oh,
stick
gotcha.
it, put them in the trailer.
So like puzzle pieces that fit
Exactly
together.
right.
They're already
So allow them,
pre-cut, pre-made to fit
Yeah,
together.
exactly
So you don't
right.
have guesswork or anything.
yeah, allow you to get from the front door to where the work is doing, whether it be polishing or whatever, or demo. A lot of demolition companies are using our stuff.
Now I have a question. I'm asking for a friend. I had a project recently that had a floor protection that was not yours, but I won't say the name. And they decided first they had an interior courtyard, and they took a Skytrack, a big tall high lift, and they had it in the courtyard. And they decided to keep working even after like 4 inches of rain. And so they buried the Skytrack up to the top of the wheels, so about 4.5 feet in the mud. So then they kept trying to get it out, couldn't get it out. So they decided to drive a tracked dozer through the main entrance of the building, down about 90 feet of hallway to where the courtyard was, so they could use the tracked dozer to pull out the Skytrack. Now, would your board hold up to that? How durable is it?
Yeah, so it's durable. So we've had 100-ton cranes driving over and setting up on the board,
Yeah.
but it had a stable base of concrete underneath it.
Oh yeah, there's concrete here.
So so
The particular floor protection they used had, I wouldn't say zero, but somewhere between 0 and 1% protection. And so what we had on the polished concrete with multiple colors in a high decorative area, the main entrance to a college, we had backhoe track marks all down the middle of the hallway, destroying the concrete underneath the floor protection.
Yeah,
So it had good base.
So I was thinking it was going to be on the soil.
No, this was a finished building. They
Wow.
took the front doors off. The entire front aluminum facing of the building came off, so they could get the dozer inside.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
glass, aluminum, yeah, the whole thing.
Yeah. So I would have put the board down and then our all-terrain mat over the top of that. Our all-terrain mat is a walk-off mat that effectively is like 3.5, 3.3 feet wide, but it's about yay big. I don't know what that is in inches or
Looks
something.
Another Australian term, yay.
Yeah.
Looks about an inch and a quarter.
Yeah,
thick.
like,
I'll Google it.
Yeah, thanks. But you can for rough terrain, you can stake them down. It's like a site walk-off mat, but it has extremely strong cushioning effect. So
it spreads out the weight.
spreads the weight.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Okay.
you can zip tie them or get some wire and put 2 or 3 courses together to have that track drive on it. But,
Okay.
yeah.
Well, I have one more product that I want to ask you about, and then I want to kind of change tactic a little bit.
Sure.
Before I do, today we're drinking Jack Daniel's Sinatra Select. So very, very good whiskey. Not much of it left. If you can find it, great. It's really good.
Not a paid advertisement.
Daniels.
Not paid.
Yeah,
Daniels, if
Jack
you want to
Daniels
send me
is
some,
not,
feel
is
free.
not contributed in any way. In fact, they've got a lot of my money instead of the other way around. But anyway, okay. So the other product that I wanted to talk about or mention. So this actually has 0% to do with concrete. So I was at the World of Concrete. This was several years ago, and you had a little clear plexiglass box set up. And you had a piece of rebar in there where you could put your hand in with an angle grinder and gloves, and turn the angle grinder on, hit the piece of rebar and shoot sparks up. And then you had a piece of glass dropped in. And on one side you had, what was it called? Glass Advance? Or
Glass
something?
Advance, yeah.
Glass Advance. And so then you had half the piece of glass that had the Glass Advance on it, the other piece of the glass that had nothing on it. And then when you pulled it out, you literally just pulled it off. I don't know, like a sticker.
Yeah, it peels off.
On the glass, on the side that had the Glass Advance, and you had 0 damage. And on the other side that had no protection, the glass was just pitted and destroyed. Right? Okay, so I had a restaurant chain that's a customer of mine that I'm the consultant for their floors, but they just in a random conversation as we were driving around looking at some of their stores, they explained that their storefronts are all along major roads, and they end up getting their windows really dirty, and they get hit quite often with rocks just because of where they are in the country and the debris that's on the roads. You know, they're in a mountainous area, so debris that's on the roads. And so we're complaining about how, you know, they're always having to fix their glass in the front of the store, because I noticed that like the third store we went to had issues. So I told them about your glass advance, and they, I think, started buying it, and they would spray it on the outside of their already open buildings because it has kind of a bluish color, and that was the same as their brand color. So they would spray it and peel it once a year and put a new coat on. And then I shared that same information with some grocery groups who now put it on the front of all of their cooler cases. Now that has nothing to do with concrete, but tell me a little bit about that, or tell everybody else a little bit about that, because I think it's a pretty interesting product.
Yeah, so the Glass Advance is, as you say, it's a spray on as a liquid, dry, it peels off as a film. It can be used on glass, aluminum. I would say aluminium, but I've been here for so long I have to say aluminum because I'm translating. Aluminum mullions, so, you know, the frontage, the storefront shop, the framing, stainless steel, anything that's not acrylic.
Can I spray it on my daughter to protect her from her boyfriend?
That might be. I'll have to get back to you. I'll have to see.
Just do random.
Let me know if you want me to edit that out.
No.
I'm not joking.
So yeah, so it's a fantastic product. It's used a lot to protect glass and windows from masonry. Yeah. So whether it be the render or the cement, or that comes from the floors above, from if some welding, grinding, so it's flame retardant from the grinding starts. Even like acid washing, people that need to acid wash brick, or so it will protect the glass from being etched or damaged that way. Any overspray like sealers and whatnot.
Yeah.
So they some of our biggest customers are masonry businesses that realise that if they don't protect the glass,
they're going to have to pay for the replacement.
They're on the hook for it. So so it's better to, again, it's just like cheap insurance. Just do it right the first time and be done with it. So and it you know, we do have a blue. We can make it in a tinted colour, which we did for an airport once, where they were doing some work in a terminal, but they didn't want to. So they had some welding work. They were doing like an expansion for the terminal. So they were doing some welding. But they didn't want the arc flare to damage the sight of the pilots who were coming up and parking at the gates. So we tinted it for them. So that helped out. It can be clear as well. So yeah, it's a versatile product. And out of all of our products, it's the one it's the forgotten sheep of the family, but it's one of the most.
As a concrete guy, I've been impressed with the protection ability, even though it has nothing to do with the work that I do normally every day.
You know, when you have guys that are pouring footpaths out the front of the storefronts, you know, there's
footpaths and sidewalks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Damn it. Yeah. So sidewalk. So the splash of the concrete during the pour. You know,
I can see that.
Yeah, it helps a lot.
All right. So changing direction. You know, coming from Australia, which obviously is a somewhat close but quite different culture than here in the United States. There's a different, I assume that there's probably a different level of business education, or the way that you run a business in Australia versus the way that you run a business here in the United States. Having been a businessman both in Australia and in the United States, what are some things that are different, and what are some things that people in the United States that run small to medium-sized businesses, what are some lessons that you can give us on things that you wish more people in the U.S. knew?
I think there's, so for the most part, it's the trades. Trades in Australia, even though if you ever see photos of tradesmen wearing like work boots with shorts, they're in Oz. You know, you don't have to have long. You don't. It's normal. You don't have to have long pants. But it's the attention to detail. Like every tradesman has gone through his apprenticeship, whether it's skilled labour. You know, there's no, effectively, I don't think there's any unskilled labour.
Okay.
So for every guy on a job site, he's either an apprentice or has been an apprentice, and he's working his way through his craft, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
I think that helps a lot in terms of attention to detail, especially with our products. You know, reading the instructions, working out, okay, I've got some stairs, or I've got this odd shaped room, how am I going to work around, instead of just laying out our products in a straight run. That's one of the biggest things that I've noticed. The other thing would be, it's not as... Yeah.
Please forgive me. I want to make sure that I understand it. So what you're saying is, in the United States, in some industries, the growth and the normal operating procedure in the United States moves faster, so we end up with less skilled tradesmen than in Australia, where I don't know, maybe the economy is such, or they just built up the infrastructure to the point where most subcontractors, regardless of what work they're doing, have more training in Australia than what they have in the United States. Is that what you're saying?
Potentially. And remember, the only industry I had exposure to in the States, in Australia, was the tile industry. So,
okay.
In terms of the construction side of things.
Gotcha.
I did other things, obviously, more on the accounting and finance side of things. But like those technical colleges you talked about,
Mm-hmm.
they're everywhere. So you get to year 10, which is 15 and 16, and you either go to high school or you go to TAFE.
So 10 means grade 10, meaning like,
yeah,
you know, like a sophomore in high school in the United States.
right.
And at that point, you make a decision whether you want to move into a trade, which then you'll start getting trained not only through the basics of school, like math and reading and whatnot, but you'll get trained in that particular trade, versus in the United States, where we don't, there are technical colleges, but they only cover about 6.5% of high school graduates go to a technical college. The rest either don't go to any college or they go to a university, and none of that happens until after they graduate high school, which is finish 12th grade. So at a minimum, the U.S., they're 3 years behind Australia in making a determination and saying, I'm going to learn to be a plumber or a welder or an electrician or tile installer or whatever, right?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
What is the pay commensurate? So are trades compensated well in Australia? Okay.
Very. Yeah, and the cost of living in Oz is
it's high.
Dramatically higher than here, but standard wages are also triple what they are here.
Right. So it meets inflation, so it matches.
Yeah. But yeah, like, so you'll have, you know, I went to school with some guys who either left at year 10 just to go to be an apprentice full time, or go into the field and work with a business.
Okay, so they start their apprenticeship, don't even finish through 12th grade. In 10th grade they finish, and then they say, I'm going to be an electrician, so I might as well go to work for an electrician and start learning the trade.
Or there's in between where you can say, I'm going to see out high school, I'm going to go through to year 12, but I want to take some trade classes. So for those classes, they would go off campus and go to TAFE, TAFE. That was back in my day. I don't know what it's called now.
Well, I think we're in the United States. I think we had that before, but mainly it was more agricultural. So you go through like, especially in the South, you had FFA, Future Farmers of America, and then you had ag programs through school, and you could do an ag work program where typically the second half of the year, so from January until August, you could basically leave halfway through the day and go to work in an agricultural job like farming or ranching or something like that.
Yeah.
I never, at least when I was in school, I never really saw that for any other trades, but as a consultant, I see more and more of the high schools doing these vocational buildings. Like I said, we talked about the project earlier, where they're, as part of your high school education, you're spending, learning to be an air conditioning repairman or an electrician or a beautician or, do hair
Mechanic or whatever.
Yeah, whatever. And so I'm starting to see more of that now, but so that's been typical in Australia for a couple of decades, and we're just now in the U.S. just now getting it. I think a lot of our trades in the United States, and this is something that I see as a consultant, we want to commoditize everything. So we want to take everything into a death spiral of how cheap can it go? How cheap can it go? How cheap can you get it? How cheap can you get it? And so the GCs and the owners want to continually pay the cheap price, even if that means they give up on the quality. They count that against the money that they saved by paying less than what they contracted, what it would cost to install what they contracted. So they get less than what they contracted for, and that creates kind of an adversarial relationship between the owner and the GC and then the subcontractors, where the subcontractors have bid, I'm going to use a random example. So I'll use polish gun. So I had a project last month that the cost, I wrote the specifications, and I know quite a bit about the contracting side. So I know that the specifications that I wrote have a cost of $3 per square foot, give or take 5 cents, somewhere right around $3 a square foot. And then the owner decided to, with the GC working it, to take a contractor that bid $1.75 a square foot. So they got a project that if you do it per the specs is going to cost $3 a foot, and they accepted a bid for $1.75 a foot. And I asked them, I said, well, if I gave you a budget of $3 and you carried a budget of $3.10, why did you take a contractor that was $1.75? And the answer was, well, if they can do the job, we just made $1.35 on every square foot. Like, well, but in order for that contractor to do this job, he's going to lose $1.35 a square foot. He's not going to make any profit. He's going to be losing $1.25 a foot.
He's propagating the issue.
Yeah. So you set the contractor up where he says, well, what I bid is to do this. And so either the contractor goes in the hole and loses money, or more likely what will happen is they'll provide a product that doesn't meet the contracted work or the specifications, but the owner saved money in doing so. So when you do that day in, day out, that drives the price of the whole industry down, which then forces, like scab fixes work, which means you don't have as good a quality of work, which means that the entire industry suffers from a lower quality of work and more failures, which then takes some of the wind out of the sails of the entire industry.
Yeah, I got to wonder too if, the price increases that we're seeing now across the board that basically are related to supply.
Yeah.
Some of them. Lion's share of our price increases are from the shipping and freight and whatnot. But I got to wonder if that is going to be the leveler. you know, with the prices going up, that these guys that are the low bidders, that they just can't survive. I don't know if that's going to be the cleansing through the industry.
I think they'll. To your point, I'm gonna say something that I've said multiple times before, and I'm gonna pick my industry to begin with. So, in Australia, you know, if you're a concrete installation contractor, so you place and finish new concrete, I would assume, based on what you've stated, that you have certified installers. So guys that have been through training, they have more information about the product they're installing, and they've been through more certifications and whatnot, right? In the U.S., we're give or take 3 to 5 generations from training. So by and large, I mean, we look at submittals every day for projects all across the country, and it is very rare for us to see a contractor that has a certified flatwork ACI, American Concrete Institute, certified flatwork finisher. Very rare to see them on a job. Most of the time, what you've got is 10 to 15 years ago, a guy was a certified flatwork technician. And then he trained another guy in his company, and then that guy trained his brother or his cousin, and then that guy trained a friend.
Chinese whispers.
Yeah, and then that guy trained one other guy that's related or not related, and that guy's doing the installation work today. So we're 3 to 5 generations away from any training. Well, what that results in is guys that they say, oh, you know, I need to finish these floors by burning in the concrete. Not realizing that by burning in the concrete finishing terms, means that you continue to trowel the concrete with a steel trowel blade on a power trowel machine after the concrete is set up and hard. So instead of you moving material around and flattening the concrete or bringing up cement paste, what you end up doing is creating a huge amount of friction, and that friction melts the sand particulate that's near the surface and turns it into basically like a slab glass, so like a really weak, soft glass at the surface. But it turns dark and gives kind of a black finish, and it's a little bit shiny. So finishers think, oh, I need to burn it in order to do a good job, not realizing that by burning it in, they take away a huge amount of the strength of the slab in total. And no matter what, if you try to put tile on that glass is going to be a bond breaker, and it's going to peel off and delaminate. You put carpet on it, it's going to delaminate. You put stone on it, it's going to delaminate. You try to go polish it, and the grinders, you know, ride on top of the glass and have to get really aggressive to grind through the glass, and then they drop in, and then you got big exposed aggregate. Because as soon as you break through that glass layer, well, you can't like time it perfectly that, oh, you know, this half of a second I broke through. Now instead you've got aggressive diamonds on soft concrete underneath. But since they're 5 generations away from ever being trained on how to actually finish, they don't realize that causes a problem.
Yeah.
That's a big issue, right?
Well, even to that point, so when they burn it, they're dewatering the surface,
exactly.
But that moisture is capped now in the slab. So the hydration
can't harden the surface.
The hydration can only use up so much of it.
Mm-hmm.
You tear through the cap, then it starts coming out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and the either the thin sets or the hardwood floor adhesives or the carpet adhesives these days aren't what they used to be.
Right.
And they're all moisture
because they're
sensitive.
driven down for a cheaper price.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and you know, you got failures left, right, and centre.
Yeah.
It's that was what I was referring to in terms of they don't know what they don't know in terms of the ramifications of doing A means that later on down, you know, get to Z.
So you're in general, your materials go on at some part between concrete place and finish and the completion of a job. By the time that your materials are removed, sometimes you're 2 years away from the concrete being poured. But the issues that come up related to Skudo products actually go all the way back 2 years prior to the installation of the concrete, and maybe some issues at that point.
Yeah, and it's, you know, we may say don't use this with this. I think, oh well, screw it, we'll do it anyway.
Yep.
And
2 years later,
2 years later, oh, lo and behold, we've got some, whether it be efflorescence, or we've got hydration lines, or oh, we didn't want to wait, or you know, the potential is limitless. But again, communication is the key. Talking, the more we can be involved, just like any other sub, the more we can be involved in that pre-con meeting.
the design.
And the design is crucial, because we can head off a lot of issues.
So, one of the things that I run into, and then we'll kind of wrap up here, is by the time that 2 years or year plus is passed, and the material issues that from 2 years ago pop up, the concrete contractor has been paid out, and the money for the whole job is gone. And now you're at the end of the project with a very finite amount of money left, with a significant problem with a contractor that's got paid a year plus ago. The GCs and owners, understandably, want to try to find the lowest common denominator to fix the problem, which they come back to Skudo or go to the polished concrete contractor, right?
Yeah, like it's just, we were the last on the floor for some of those scenarios, but that's when we do have issues. You know, like it's not always the case. You know, some majority, the lion's share of our projects go swimmingly. You know,
Don't have issues,
and don't have issues. So yeah, so it's always a problem of I didn't want to listen to you, but now I want you to fix the problem.
Right.
You know, so
Now that everybody else has been paid, I want it to be your problem.
yeah.
And I want you to deal with it.
And you know, and for the most part, you know, the guys put their big boy pants on and go, oh, you know, that's my issue. You know, and that is made. I suppose those as one-offs really do make our industry, or our reps essentially document all the advice that we give. So if we go to a pre-con meeting and say, hey, look, you shouldn't use that, you should do this, or you shouldn't put this down, and then say, hey, look, as per our discussion, blah blah blah. You know, so there's a paper trail. But you know, cover your ass is one thing, but at the end of the day, we want the project that we're related to go swimmingly.
Just smooth.
Yeah, and
no issues.
No issues, and then repeat customers, and so you know, sure, there's some bloody nightmare projects where someone said, oh, you know, the commercial system has a 12-month window. 2 years later, someone's saying, oh, this is not peeling up right. Well, you know, it's been 2 years.
Yeah.
Where in else? It's like opening up a
like driving a car for 2 years and no oil change?
Opening up a jar of olives that have expired a year ago, and then trying to be upset with the manufacturer that they made you sick. You know, like,
yeah, that's good.
Yeah, how is that fair or responsible? You know, so on their behalf of their own actions. So, you know, in construction, you're always going to have people either cutting corners, lowest bid, can't wait, don't want to listen to you because they know more, they think they know more. You know, we're experts in our industry, in our portion of this industry. We're not saying by any stretch of the imagination that we know everything about, you know, what as much as you do, for example, but we know a good deal because we're having to go on to that substrate. We know that we should avoid this scenario. We know that we should communicate more. We should review this or be involved more often in terms of the process. And whenever that happens, it's all good.
So,
just like this whiskey.
That's good whiskey. If you have one piece of advice that you could say to all your potential customers or your potential contractor installers, what would it be? What would be the thing that's like, this is the biggest problem I see all the time and I wish that it was different? What would that be?
It wouldn't be, this is the biggest problem, it would be use our expertise, use us, involve us more
Okay.
isolating us out of the conversation with the owners because of cost, or isolating or not including us in the pre-con meetings because of whatever reason, or ignorance, or you don't know what you don't know, or you don't know what you should know, is the biggest cause of potential issues. You know, we have guys in the field that have been in this industry, you know, as I said, like Kieran's been in the flooring industry for 40 odd years. He's seen a thing or two. You know, we have resources in our manufacturing divisions, whether it be in Asia, whether it be in Australia, whether it be in the UK, whether it be in South America. They know a thing or two in terms of how our products are put together.
Sure.
And here in the States as well. So use us. We're not an afterthought to call on.
Most manufacturers are that way. Most manufacturers they sell a gallon of product through a distributor that buys from a regional distributor that buys from them, and they're 2 or 3 degrees of separation removed from the contractor that's installing their product, and they don't really want the liability. They don't want to be involved. They just want to sell their product for a cheap price, and you know, they count their success on the number of gallons of whatever sold. You guys are different, right?
We have rebuffed advances from the big dogs to sell our products because we know exactly that. The guy on the desk, the guy on the phones, we're one of 10,000 products. They cannot know what they need to know without our inclusion. So we said, look, we don't want that business because we'd be buying a floor because they didn't ask the right question. They put product A down when product B should have been used.
Sure.
So we would rather deal direct with the GC, and that's what we do here in Texas. We don't have any distribution because we're the manufacturer and the distributor. There's no one knows it better than us. So we don't want to have that message filtered out or diluted through because someone doesn't know, or they have a staff turnover of 2 people per year. The guy we trained yesterday, he's gone next week. You know, so it's not worth our problem. So that solidifies our integrity in terms of we know what we know. We know what you should know. We know what the questions that should be asked to the GC. So that's what I mean by including us is key.
Okay. Well, how do people get a hold of you? How do they find you? Tell our viewers.
SkudoUSA.com.
That's
SKUDO.
SKUDO.
Not Skudo. It's funny. The O used to be orange, and people used to go, "Oh, Scud," and okay. So we changed it to the same. So it's SkudoUSA.com. We're based here in Dallas, Texas. The office number is 973-992-0777. Give us a call. If you've got any questions, and that, in terms of the advice, that also goes to owners and architects. Right at the outset when these guys are specifying the design phase, it's huge.
Yeah.
You know, we had all these problems with all of our other projects. Let us know. Like, we'll tell you if we can be useful or not. Because the last thing we want to do is have any screw ups that is somewhere related to our name. So, yeah.
Well, I appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Talk again soon.
Thank you.